The cursor blinked at me from across the screen like it was waiting for an answer I didn't have. I'd been staring at the same component for 20 minutes, the code half finished, my coffee gone cold beside me. It wasn't a difficult problem, I'd solved harder ones before breakfast, but my mind kept drifting back to the conversation I'd had with my mother the night before. The one that ended the same way they all ended. With silence, then guilt, then me sitting alone wondering why I always felt like I owed a debt I never agreed to take on. I'm a UI developer. I build the things people see when they open apps, the buttons they press, the screens that guide them through their days. To most people in my industry, it's skilled work, creative work, work that requires both technical precision and aesthetic intuition. To my parents, it has always been, playing on the computer. That phrase has followed me my entire adult life. Even when I landed my first real job at 22, even when I negotiated my way into a six-figure salary by 25, even as I built a career that afforded me a comfortable apartment, savings, and the kind of financial stability most people my age were still dreaming about, to them, I was playing. I was wasting. I was doing something that didn't count. My brother Marcus works as a teller at a bank. He wears a collared shirt and stands behind a counter and processes transactions. It is honest work. I have never said otherwise. But my parents have spent years introducing him to their friends as, our son, the banker, as though the word itself carried weight, dignity, a kind of legitimacy that whatever I did could never match. At family gatherings, Marcus would talk about his branch's quarterly numbers and my father would nod along knowingly, and I would sit across the table and wonder what exactly I had done wrong. The thing is, it was never about merit. I had better grades. I was offered scholarships Marcus wasn't. In sports, I was the one coaches pulled aside after games to tell my parents I had real potential. But none of that seemed to matter, because I had chosen a path they couldn't explain to their friends, and Marcus had chosen one they could. So Marcus was the success, and I was the cautionary tale they told in the form of compliments. Your brother always had his head in the clouds, and I learned, slowly and then all at once, that love in my family was not unconditional. It was transactional, and I had simply never been trading in the right currency. I started pulling back in my mid-20s. Fewer phone calls. Shorter visits. It wasn't dramatic, there was no confrontation, no ultimatum. I just began to take up less space in their orbit, and they barely seemed to notice, which told me everything I needed to know. The distance grew wider when the marriage pressure started. 27 and unmarried was apparently a kind of failure in their eyes, something to be whispered about and fixed. My mother would call and spend the first 5 minutes asking about people from our community who had recently gotten engaged, as though the information was incidental and not a message. I stopped answering as often. My father would leave voicemails asking when I was going to settle down, and I'd listen to them in my car and then drive in silence for a while before going inside. Then everything changed, all at once, the way things tend to when they've been holding together with compromises and silence for too long. My father lost his job last year in a round of layoffs. He was 58 years old, mid-level management at a logistics company where he had worked for 11 years, and one morning they called him into a conference room and handed him a folder and that was that. He came home and didn't tell my mother for 3 days. When he finally did, she called Marcus first, and then, as an afterthought, me. The health problems came after, the way they often do when a person loses the structure that has been holding them upright. First his blood pressure, then a scare with his heart, then a diagnosis that required medication and follow-up appointments and a new, more careful way of living. My mother, who had never worked outside the home, who had come to this country speaking almost no English and had spent 30 years building a life entirely within the walls of their household and community, found herself suddenly facing a future she had no tools to navigate on her own. Their house is not paid off. They have maybe 12 years left on the mortgage. Between that and utilities, groceries, medical bills, and the general cost of existing in the world, they need around $1,800 a month just to stay afloat. Marcus, who still lives with them, pays $400 in rent. That leaves a gap of $1,400 with no clear way to fill it, and so they turned to me. I said no. I want to sit with that for a moment, because it is not a simple sentence, even if it sounds like one. I said no the way you say no after years of rehearsing a version of this moment in your head without ever expecting it to actually arrive. I said no because I am 27 years old and still carrying the memory of being 12 and watching my father praise Marcus's report card while mine sat on the counter unopened. I said no because I still hear my mother's voice telling me that what I did wasn't a real job, that I should have studied something practical, that my brother understood what it meant to be responsible. I said no because when I was struggling through my first year out of college, cobbling together freelance work and eating badly and trying to build something from nothing, no one called to ask how I was doing. But I also said no because I wanted to see what would happen. And what happened was this: my mother told me that Marcus couldn't be expected to pay more because he has a girlfriend now, and he needs to be able to enjoy his life. I don't think I've ever felt so clearly seen for exactly what I was to them. Marcus, who lives in their house, who earns a modest salary, who has never once been criticized for his choices, Marcus gets to enjoy his life. I, who have supported myself entirely since graduation, who built a career they mocked, who has been financially independent and responsible for years, I am the one who needs to step up. Not because I am the more capable one, though I am. Not because I am better positioned to help, though I am. But because they are angry with me, and giving them money is how I am apparently supposed to apologize for having limits. I told them they would need to find another way. I told them to look into assistance programs, to speak with a financial advisor, to consider whether the house was something they could realistically keep. I told them these things calmly and clearly, and they received them as cruelty, and the call ended badly. My partner's name is Daniel. He grew up in a household where family obligation was not just a value but a practice, where money flowed between generations without resentment or negotiation, where caring for parents was so fundamental it had never needed to be discussed. He is a generous person. It is one of the things I love most about him. But generosity, like most virtues, can become its own kind of pressure when it's applied to someone else's life. He told me he thought I was being selfish. He said it gently, the way you say something you've been holding for a while and have finally decided to release. He said that family should come first, and that my reaction worried him, not just about my parents but about us, about what kind of person I was, about what I would do if he were the one who needed something I didn't want to give. I understood what he was saying. I even understood where it came from. But I also noticed that he was asking me to absorb $1,400 a month in financial obligation to people who had spent my entire life making me feel like a consolation prize, and framing my hesitation as a character flaw. That is a lot to ask. That is, in fact, everything. We talked for a long time that night. I told him things I hadn't told many people. About the report cards, about the playing on the computer, about the banker brother and the wedding pressure and the years of feeling like I was competing in a race where the finish line kept moving. He listened. He held my hand. He said he hadn't known the full story. And then he said something that has stayed with me: I hear you. And I still think there's a version of this where you help them and also hold your boundaries. Maybe he's right. I've been turning it over ever since. Because here is the thing about bitterness: it is heavy, and it is honest, but it is not always wise. I am angry at my parents, and my anger is legitimate, and it has kept me warm on many cold nights when I needed something to hold on to. But I am also 27 years old with a career I built from nothing, a partner who loves me and is trying to understand me, and a future that is mine to shape. And somewhere in the gap between the person I was raised to feel I was and the person I actually am, there is a decision to be made. I do not think I owe my parents financial rescue simply because they raised me. Choosing to have children is not a transaction. It does not generate a debt that the child must repay on demand, especially when the raising involved its own failures, its own cruelties, its own quiet damages. But I also know that the version of me who refuses to help and walks away entirely is not making a decision from a healed place. He is making it from the same wounded place that has been making decisions for 15 years. What I want, what I think I have always wanted, is to be seen. Not managed, not leveraged, not guilt. Seen. I want my parents to know that I turned out fine, that the path I chose was worthy, that the child they underestimated built something real. I want to help them not because I am afraid of what happens if I don't, but because I chose to, freely, from a place of strength. I don't know if I'm there yet. I'm not sure they're capable of giving me what I need in return, and that's a grief I'm still learning to carry. But I've started a conversation with Daniel about what a middle path might look like, not a blank check, not a monthly obligation with no end in sight, but a structured, time-limited contribution tied to a real plan. Financial counseling, a review of whether keeping the house is viable, a conversation with Marcus about proportional responsibility. Help that has shape and intention, rather than help that is simply surrender dressed up as love. I don't know how it ends. I'm still in the middle of it, which is the most honest thing I can say. The cursor is still blinking on my screen. The code is still half finished. But I've stopped staring through it, and that might be enough for today.